Hi and welcome everyone to the Small Business Podcast. My name is Julian Gaylor and once again here with the maestro Chris Smith. How are you?
G'day Jules, how you doing today?
Very, very well. Today's a bit of a special conversation because we're talking about the blessed topic of performance reviews. Some people call them performance appraisals, and not only what they are, how to do a good one, but really looking at the underlying importance and significance and the knock-on effects that performance appraisals, good or bad, are actually going to have on a business.
Yep, absolutely.
You're talking to people about performance appraisals all the time. What's the general, culture or stigma or attitude towards performance appraisals within businesses when they come to you?
Well, look, the elevator pitch for a performance appraisal is that it gives an opportunity for both parties to air where people are at, creating a safe place to create future strategies in order to improve their wellness or the development of that employee, and also ensure that the business's goals are being met.
But is that that's what they're for? But is that the attitude that a lot of the businesses have?
No, they don't. Unfortunately,
I hear a lot that. I don't do the consults like you do, but a lot of people, because their performance appraisals are irregular and ad hoc, it tends to be that someone has a performance appraisal when something is going wrong.
Yep.
And so that when performance appraisals are announced, that's where all of the employees start to tense up and think, uh-oh.
Yeah, it's the performance appraisals are sometimes turning into performance management. Mm-hmm. And the biggest problem with that is they go into performance appraisals with a very negative mindset,
mm-hmm.
And
it's almost defensive. I've got to protect myself.
Correct. I've got to just tell them what they kind of need to know. Get through this appraisal and everything's going to be all great. Where it actually should be seen as an opportunity for the business to learn about, what that employee is doing great, where they might need assistance, letting them know what the direction of their role and their department is going to be going through in the next, say, between now and the next performance management plan, whether it's quarterly or half yearly or yearly, and setting those expectations that it's actually an opportunity to continue the attitude that both parties are united.
I think that's a good point. And I think that if some people's mentality around performance appraisals is, okay, this is just to tell the employee how they're going and what they need to improve on or what they're doing well on. But in actual fact, it should be a two-way street where it is, yes, okay, we are appraising your performance to look at what are you doing great and what are the opportunities to make you even better? What do we need to improve on? But also, tell us, what are we doing well? What do we need to improve on? Do you see any areas where we could be doing better? Because at the end of the day, these people that you're doing the appraisals on, they're in the trenches every single day. They're the ones living and breathing the business, and they're going to see things from a totally different perspective.
Well, let's go back to our previous podcast around the dream team. If you've hired a really great dream team and you have got them talking about how your business can be improved, in those appraisals, it actually is where you're going to see them at their very best, because they're going to have a frank conversation with them, as are you, in order to say, how do we move our relationship forward? How do we improve this situation and that situation being that, like you said, this is where you're going great and we're really pleased with your performance. This is areas of gaps for growth. In order to get there, how can we set you up for success? But like you said, being vulnerable as a business and saying, we're actually really interested in what you have to say about your department, the business, and how it can be improved. And once we've got this information back from you, we're going to actually put strategies in place and circle back with you on exactly how we're going to execute that strategy to improve the areas that the employer group is saying the business needs to improve, and you actually do it, right? And that's the difference. A vulnerable business owner or performance appraisal is just as much about the business as it is for the employee. And if you're prepared to be vulnerable, it'll show that you truly care. But the vulnerability should lead to action, because you would not, if you are a good employer, would not want your employees to continue to feel negative about something that a simple strategy could fix.
Well, nobody wins on that.
And no one wins on that,
No one
correct.
wins. So
exactly.
with that, what you're saying, I mean, to be able to set up that environment to give feedback and so on, I think this really comes down to the structure and process of the performance appraisal. Now, a lot of times we see, and in many cases, it's, okay, we will just have a performance appraisal meeting, we sit down and we chat. And, you know, if some people are doing it okay, they've go, okay, well, let's look at your KPIs and your position description, but let's chat about that. But what we find, and I think that others may have experienced this too, is that if that's the first initiation of this appraisal, it may not lead to the best result for a couple of reasons. And I see this as, firstly, the employee is being put straight into the hot seat. They may get a little bit flustered. They may not be able to articulate themselves as well as they could. And I think that's the big one. And so I know you're a big proponent on, you know, self-assessments leading up to the appraisal. Is that correct? Yeah,
well, there's a reason for that. There's no point having them being put into the hot seat and basically going through an interview every 3 or 6 months, because that's what you're actually giving them, is a meeting that they don't have a clear understanding of the agenda. So they're on the defensive. You say one thing that is maybe not articulated by you to the employee in a way that is meant to be constructive, but it's actually demeaning, that can be quite poor. So doing self-appraisals enables them to...
So explain what a self-appraisal is.
Yeah, so a self-appraisal is, if you've got a performance indicator, so if you're listening to this, you've got an A4 piece of paper, split it down the middle. The left-hand side is performance indicator, and the right-hand side...
So they're KPIs.
KPIs is the measured performance. So those performance indicators are actually what you measure that person against. So
and they should be on their position description?
Correct. They're tied to the position description, which is then forms part of their contract with you, what you require them to do. And those position descriptions have how do they do it, why do they do it, and what that expected outcome is. So that's understood by all parties. So when they're self-assessing to those KPIs, they can say, you know, I'm doing it, this is why I'm doing it, this is how I can see that I can continue to be predictable here, or I'm hitting my targets, but I am struggling because it's taking more time than I want it to, but I've got an idea on how we can streamline this. And they can self-assess and talk about how they're looking to perform in those areas, or they're needing assistance. So they're going to give you, I'm doing really well and this is why, or I'm doing really well but this is how we can prove it, or I'm not doing well and this is what help I actually need, or the worst one is, I'm awesome. And then you actually have to give them reasons why they're not as awesome.
Exactly.
And rephrasing that in a way that they can say, maybe they need to just reshape the way they feel about that KPI. But also, so you should have them self-assess to the KPIs, but also have them self-assess to the questions about the business. So, you know, talking about the team, the culture, their learning development opportunities, why, if they're happy, why? If they're not happy, why? And what can be done about it? So asking questions around wellness and being vulnerable as a business, and ask articulate questions that help you. If you're getting a positive answer, you're getting confirmation that you're doing those things really well. But if you do get a negative answer, you're getting confirmation that there needs to be changes done here. And that's what leads you to the follow-up chats that everyone should be doing after performance appraisals.
So with those self-assessments, I mean, the way that you want it to be, let's say that you have a performance appraisal coming up at the end of the month where you're actually sitting down with the employee.
Yep.
You want that self-assessment to go out to them well beforehand.
Yep.
So they're doing this in a time where, once again, they're not in that hot seat of their performance appraisal. It probably makes a lot of smart business sense to go, hey, I want you to block out an hour. I don't care if it's on our clock, our time, paid time, an hour to do this self-assessment. Don't worry about emails or anything. You sit here and take the time to articulate and think about your answers, because I really want you to have the ability to give us your true thoughts. Whereas if they're in the hot seat, they get flustered.
Yep.
They'll walk out of there going, oh, I said that wrong. I forgot to say this.
Yep.
And the two big things that I find beneficial with doing that self-assessment is, firstly, the employee gets a chance to really articulate well, which is good for them. They feel good about that. It's going to give you better answers. But going back to your part where if an employee says that they think they're awesome, that what you don't want is an employee not doing a self-assessment, walking into a performance appraisal where they think that they are God's gift to your business and they think they're great, they're getting a promotion right now, but you're sitting there going, okay, we're going to have a really tough conversation with Johnny because he's so far off the mark, and either it's a disciplinary action or it may be getting to termination time. Yep. If you're both going into that meeting with those two headsets, that's going to turn into what I call like a Faulty Towers episode. Yeah. Whereas if you actually read their self-assessment, you'll see that and go, oh, okay, we need to approach this conversation a little bit differently.
Yeah, correct. And that's the thing. It's about setting the conversation up for success. So I'm doing all this activity and I've got a great sales pipeline. Okay, what matters is you're closing not enough business, and it's great you've called all these people and you've set all these meetings, but without delivering revenue, it means that you're not actually in the end achieving success. They might see meetings as being success where you're seeing the result as success. So it's then about saying, well, breaking the conversation down about, okay, you get meetings, great, but when you're in meetings, let's maybe have a role play, pitch to me, and let's just look at, you get more meetings than anyone here, but the guy down the road from you, or down the hall from you, has half the meetings but doubles your sales.
That comes down to the KPIs, really.
Exactly right. Yeah. So it comes down to really understanding what drives each KPI and what people perceive as success. Mm-hmm. And as a lot of people do perceive success differently to their employers. And that's why having these KPIs and self-assessments done, where you, like you're saying, you now have a plan of attack, you know where they think they're going really great, and you can then realign what success looks like in that role and look at a development plan in order to say, well, they're winning opportunities for meetings, but they're maybe not qualifying or they're not pitching well. Let's have some training sessions on that and see how we can improve that.
Clearly that person is phenomenal at that. Like if this person has a knack to be able to book that many meetings or demonstrations or whatever you want to talk about, they have a serious skill that none of your team has. So if you're blindly going, you're not closing deals where, heaven forbid, terminating you, well, you're cutting your nose to spite your face.
Exactly. You're actually looking at it the wrong way. It's like they've got a really great skill. What happens if they set all those appointments and they work with John down the hall and they work together?
Whereas John would dream that he could book like that.
That's exactly right. So it's about maybe creating a sales pod.
You set them up, I knock them down.
Exactly right. And that's exactly, sometimes you need to reshape a role and say, look, you're a great appointment setter, but you're not as great as closing. So how about you guys work together and maybe do a shared comm split? And all of a sudden, because you're closing more meetings, your revenue goes up because now they're working collaboratively as a pod.
And they've both got angst in their role right now. So I can't book meetings, I can't close deals. But if they're working together,
correct. Like, and that sometimes is what you need to do. And it's sometimes looking at, performance appraisals, it is, if you go back and do the training and they improve, then all of a sudden you have got someone who can, book meetings, but also close meetings because you spent time on actually training them on, hey, when you're pitching, you're not articulating yourself, you're going too fast, you're not asking enough needs-based questions. If you ask these questions in this sequential order, you'll close more deals. If they're doing that and start closing more deals, then you're going to be happy. Exactly. So it's really about setting those expectations.
You're spot on there. And I mean, we've spoken a lot about how it's to the benefit of the business there, but let's talk about benefit to the employees, as though that if this is a perfect example, if we've found that, let's say, you've got some employees who may not have this, they may be lacking in some areas of skill set where they're needing to succeed. But if you're able to have a very articulate performance appraisal where you've given them the space to, as I said, articulate their feelings and where they're at, you're able to put plans around that. But the fact that you've got this raw data from them, in that example you're talking about, where let's say we've got Johnny, the meeting booker, and then Sarah, the deal closer, both of them have angst in their role. But the fact that you have taken the time to identify all of this and being able to look at the business as a whole, go, okay, well, Johnny's good at this, but Sarah's good at this. Let's change some things around. Well, Johnny and Sarah are going to no doubt feel better in their role, going,
Yep.
oh, thank God, I don't have that worry anymore because Sally's so awesome at that, but she's helping me out here. I'm helping her with that. Team morale goes up, not only with each other, they're high-fiving that they're helping each other out, but they're like, hey, this business actually listens. They care about us, that they know where my strengths are, they appreciate my strengths, but they're helping me in the areas that I'm not. And why would they want to go and work for anyone else?
Yeah, that's correct. It's important that you base decisions about people on data and looking at what they're doing and contributing, and actually being open to that constructive criticism. You've got the data, you've analysed it, you're demonstrating that you've analysed it, you've demonstrated you've thought about where that person's at and how to move that person forward prior to that performance appraisal. So you can say, you've said this, data says this, we've thought about this strategy, how do you feel about that? If they go, yes, that seems like a good idea, or yes, I'm open to training on how to pitch or other, then it's all great. If they say, no, I'm awesome and I don't need your help, then you can say, look, the data's saying one thing, then it's really about a performance improvement plan process at that point, because it's very obvious that they're not wanting to change, even though the data is 100% accurate. And you've done a deep dive into their activity and behaviours. So sometimes at that point, it's either A, they're getting development plans, which is a positive connotation, and they're working with the new strategy, or performance plan if they go the other way.
Yeah.
And that's a bad thing for both parties. But you can say hand on heart, you've given them an opportunity. So you can say, okay, if you want to continue in the current KPIs without this training, if you don't perform, you will find yourself having disciplinary action because you're refusing an opportunity to grow and learn. So if they are doing that, then you've left with no choice at that point.
But speaking of data, this goes back to something we harp on nearly every conversation that we have is position descriptions. You may have data to say that they're not performing at the level that you want them to. Yeah. But if that isn't actually articulated on the position description, let's say we're talking about Sally booking demos or whatever sort of KPI you're looking at there, that if you don't have that specifically itemized to say X amount of demos per month need to be booked, it's very hard to say, Sally, you're not doing a good job at that because you've got nothing to base it off. And that's where you can speak from conviction, and it's very black and white there. If Sally thinks she's doing awesome in her role, but she's booking 15 demos when she's meant to book 30, that's easy for you to go, Sally, these numbers don't add up.
Yeah, correct. I mean, you see position descriptions written where it's just roles and responsibilities, and it just says book demos, book appointments. Okay, so
cool. I booked 2 demos. That's what I did.
So you're in a business in a position where you have not articulated actually what your requirements are, and that's a real problem. And like a lot of sales, talking about salespeople, you get someone who's selling widgets. You've got to hit a revenue of $50,000 a month. Okay, and the employee says, well, I went out there and did that. However, what you haven't articulated is gone further. You need a revenue at 50,000, but you cannot go below 40% GP. So if they've sold everything
discounts everywhere.
Yeah, if they've just dropped in discounts everywhere at 20% GP.
Cost price $50,000.
Yeah,
done.
correct. That's what happens. And you see people have issues where I've went out and did everything I can. I had to discount to get that revenue number, which they've actually done their job. Mm-hmm. But what they haven't understood is the business has got gross profit margin requirements.
They've played in the rules given to them.
Correct. And that's exactly it. So you have to be articulate on certain benchmarks around, it's calls, acquisition, revenue, GP. Make sure that the business is in a position to articulate your role is X, your role in the cog of this machine, in performing at this level enables the business to function in this way. If you're selling $50,000 worth of widgets and we're at a 20% GP, we're actually at a 6% or 6% loss as an example. So our business can't sustain that. So it's really important that people understand their roles and performance managing to those roles and making sure people are hitting those targets via performance improvement process if they're not performing, or development plans enables the business and the employee to have that articulate, transparent, factual-based chat. Because when you're arguing on facts, you can't argue against facts. If you're arguing against innuendo, that is he said, she said. And that's the big problem with a lot of performance appraisal processes, that they start at a low base with a very poorly written PD and they end up with argy-bargy.
It's open to interpretation.
Correct.
And of course, everyone's going to have a different one there. But look, that's, I think they're all really key points. So, I mean, I guess there's a wrap there with performance appraisals. It goes bigger than just the individual performance. It's the culture and happiness. The better the appraisals, the better the team's culture is going to be. I think the key takeaway here for people is if you're not doing performance appraisals, start doing them. Would you say every 6 months?
Look, at a minimum every 6 months. We prefer every quarter.
Okay.
Because our business is very agile.
But definitely not ad hoc, or let's say annually.
No, I think annually is too long, because you can get people that have to wait so long to air their grievances.
Or wait that long to find out that they're not doing well. And it's like, why didn't you tell me sooner?
Yeah, exactly right. It's just every quarter, I think, is if you've, depending on the size of your employees, but if you're doing it quarterly, it can be an amazing outcome to saying, pulse check, culturally we're doing this great, culturally we're doing this not so great, this is how we're going to fix it. And articulating that to the employee group continues to say, and to cut this conversation off, is you're now saying, we listen. When we listen, we turn that into action. We get your input on whether that strategy or action is going to work out for both parties. And because we're doing that, we're building a relationship. And that's what it is at the end of the day. And people get it wrong because of they're not doing these basic fundamentals.
Cool. All right, so we're going to go. We want 3-month or quarterly performance appraisals. We want to make sure we are getting our employees to do detailed self-assessments. And making sure this isn't just about telling them, it's about getting feedback from them. And of course, making sure to show the employees that you are taking action based on this. It's not just a hi, hello, then the conversation goes to the wind. It's based on what's happened. These are the plans we're going to put in place to better you, better the team, better the culture.
Correct. Post that appraisal is important that you go back to the employee group and that all that employee and book these development plans in, so it's in black and white. This is happening on this day to improve our relationship. Not improve you, it's actually improving our relationship, and that's the important point.
Look, I think that's a great way to wind it up. And like the great thing is, Happy HR, our HR department is a box, as we call it. Our platform actually has that whole process in it, where it will automate and streamline that whole process for you, where your employees can do their self-assessment online. It automatically will generate all the KPIs from their position description and go into the appraisal. You can ask any other questions you like, but it makes the process foolproof for you. So I think, look, if you're interested in that, I would say jump over to happyhr.com and you can see how we book in for a demo, a free trial, look at how this process works along with everything else in the system. And I think you'll find that it all just coincides towards just less HR angst for you, more engagement from your team, and less admin that you have to do and worry about.
Correct, absolutely.
All right, well, thanks so much, everyone. We will speak to you next time on this Australian Small Business Podcast. Thank you.